Hey guys, Ben from Dobinsons. Today we're going to take a look at the NP300 Navara control arms. That is something we've been working on for probably about 12 months now. We're trying to get the perfect product. So looking at the arms themselves, they're a drop forged aluminium arm. So we went with the drop forged and then the CNC machine finish to give us the strength over the billet, but to also give us the beautiful CNC billet style finish for the arm. A couple of problems with the Navara with the factory arms. Main one being alignment and the full droop. So the upper arm hits the coil tower at full droop. So redesigning these arms to eliminate that issue, give us more droop for more wheel travel, bigger lifts, and also giving us a bit more strength and getting our alignment back where it needs to be at the higher lifts. The arms, fully adjustable. So you can see the rod ends here, adjustable, and they get the left and right hand thread, so they're adjustable on car as well. So you can throw these things in, get your alignment, and no need to pull the arms out to adjust them. Just use the tool that we'll provide, and you can just adjust them to get your castor camber and whatnot, right? Natural rubber bushings in the ends there, so we try to steer clear of the poly where we can. These just don't have the squeaks and stuff and give us plenty of flex and allow us to get the droop and all that sort of stuff as well. So lots of stuff on the design, particularly high clearance. So you can see on the inside, particularly on the top of the coil tower and in the ball joint area, plenty of clearancing. So the arms are super meaty, heaps of meat, but where we need it, we've gone with plenty of clearance on the machining side of things. So clear anodized, keep them looking good, and yeah, nice sort of OEM style quality ball joint. So we tried to steer clear from the potential failure points. So extended ball joints and that sort of stuff weren't really an option for us. We didn't want to have those failure points. Well, good, let's throw these things in and talk a bit more about them. All right, so looking at the downfalls of the OEM upper control arm here, you can see that with it there, how we've got it set up with a bit of a longer travel shock. Generally, your center of hub to guard at full droop here, that's sort of touching at around 620. So up under here in the OEM upper control arm, near the ball joint and the top of the tower with a longer travel shock, we've got contact there. So usually we've got to limit this full droop hub to guard to around 610 to 615 with our shocks. From there, then we can go into the longer travel shocks and switch out the upper arm. So let's get into it. All right, so it's a pretty straightforward process. Wheel off, we're going to support the hub here with the jack, and then pop out the split pin up here, drop the nut off of the spindle and upper control arm, and just loosen that factory UCA. And pop this ball joint out. There we go. Then we're just going to take off the inner bolts for the upper control arms. To get these bolts out can be a bit tricky. We've got to just pop out the steering column spline just to give us a bit of room to move up in here, and then when we put the new arm in, we can just slip them around the other way and we'll be right. All right, so we're just going to take this bolt out of the steering shaft column here, just on the spline where it comes down on the base here onto the steering rack itself. So just a 12mm bolt. So we've got the bolts loosened on the inner bolts here on the UCA. So we're just going to take the spline bolt out, and we're just going to make sure it's marked so we can line it back up. So we want to get it exactly on the same spline as we put it back in. So we just got to get this out to get enough room to wriggle out this rear bolt here at the top. And then we're going to throw it straight back in. So you can see up in here, this is the bolt we just removed, the 12mm bolt, and that's the spline. We're just going to wriggle that up. You can see we've got the alignment marks on there. We're going to wriggle that up, take the rear inner bolt off the UCA, and then throw it straight back down exactly where it came from. Alrighty, so you can sometimes wriggle it back just enough, not even completely off the spine, and you kind of push the column up and in enough just to get the rear bolt out. So once you get that one out, we're just going to slide that spline straight back on where it came from there and throw the bolt back in. Right, so we've got the steering spline bolt back in, and we're just going to drop off the upper control arm now. So just take a little bit of weight off the spindle here so we don't pull down on the UCA. All right, we've got the factory UCA, and you can see up under this section and around here is where we have the issues on both sides for it hitting on the coil tower there. All right, so you look at the factory arm versus our replacement arm. So you can sort of see the clearance definitely on the back edge there, and it's a bit difficult to see, but you can also sort of see the clearance on the front side and under here as well. So you can see, particularly in this section here, is sort of our critical area for clearance. You can see the huge difference to the factory one. So these arms have some castor built into them as well, obviously for being lifted higher. So ball joints back a bit further, probably a bit further than we would normally like for the alignment. But the reason for that is again for clearance to the tower. So running it too far forwards and you start running into the tower again. So we've had to get the ball joint itself back a little bit further than we would like, but just means the castor values after the alignment are generally on the higher side, up around 3 degrees, a little bit more than that. So they still drive nice and straight in that. But yeah, we get that castor, get that ball joint back, give us the castor and the clearance. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is set the lengths on the arms up for the initial setup. So what we want to do is first just make sure the threads are clean and throw a bit of grease in there on the inner and the outer thread to make sure that they don't have any dramas with the steel going into the alloy there. And then we want to screw them right in. So you've got a left and the right hand thread, so you want to make sure our starting position is with them both completely in, so that when we thread them out, we've got an even amount of thread coming out. So essentially all you can do then is we can just wind just the actual adjustment nut itself, and this will wind out both threads. So we want to measure then from this section of the arm in here to here roughly, and then set it at the measurement that we need. So when you're setting up the lengths of these arms, we just want to make sure that we get them set up to what we need. So depending on the lift height you've got, the shocks you've got fitted, and whether or not you want to go to the lengths of grinding the coil tower, which we don't recommend. If you want to do that, that's fine to get more droop. That will affect the measurement that you set these up. So essentially we're just going to set these ones up for 34 millimeters. So from the start of the end of the arm here, sort of to the start of the edge of the eye here where the bush is pressed into. We'll set them both up at that, and then that'll get us started. So what it sort of comes down to is it then determines your droop length, which is limited by your shock travel. So essentially from the center of the bottom eye here, and then you come up to where the first washer mounts for the bottom bush there. That's kind of the length that we're looking at and chasing and trying to get right. So normally OEM arms, generally around 395-ish is the max to the bottom of the first washer for the bush, in the center of the bottom eye. But as we get up into this, we can go a little bit longer. So generally shock around about 410 extended will give you roughly 640 full droop. Around 410 to 415, which is usually fine with these arms. You get a little bit longer out of them again, but again, it's critical that we ensure that the arm does not touch any part of that coil tower at any time during the full travel. So we're going to set these up, crank up, make sure these are flat and aligned, crank up the lock nuts, and then crank up the pinch bolts. So just make sure they're parallel. We'll just crank these pinch bolts up. So they don't need to be crazy tight. Righty, so we've got the arms set. So it's a pretty straightforward process of just dropping them straight in. So sometimes getting these tight and parallel, you've got to just nip them up with them in the vehicle, but that's easy enough with the little tools we got there, or just a bigger shifter. So there's some slight variations we found in chassis between the measurements between the two mounting points for the arm. So sometimes you just got to give a little bit of a tap with a rubber mallet and they'll go straight in. Whereas these ones are going straight in like that. Get the bolts in. Alrighty, so we just got the bolts in there. So we just got them sitting in there loosely, and I'll just drop the nuts on them just loosely for now. So it's important, we don't want to tighten this up yet. So something really important is that we tighten the upper control up roughly in the middle of its travel, so that on the inner bushes, when they're bound up in the sleeve there where they mount, we want to make sure that they're not going to tear. So we don't want to have these tightened up with them in their full compression position or in the full droop position. So we want to be somewhere roughly around the middle. So we'll just drop the nuts on loosely and then we'll slip it in and have a look. Okay, so we just got the setup now with the new arms in. You can sort of see where before we were sort of limited to around 610 to 615 full droop. We haven't done anything to the tower, it's still the OEM tower. We're up around 650 now full droop. So that's generally without playing around with the tower, which we don't want to do. That's about the max full droop. So you can still see up around here, there's just a little bit more clearance. You can see the profile of the arm here, plenty of clearance up through the top, and then it comes down closer to the tower here. So we don't recommend it, but for guys that want to touch up the tower a tiny little bit in this section here, in the inner ball joint face, where we have the flat face for clearance, that'll get you down a few more mil down to around 660-ish or something, which is about the max. So yeah, generally for what we're looking for, limiting it to around that 650 mark's pretty good. That allows you to get up to sort of that 3-inch lift, 3.5-inch lift around that sort of 595 to 605 hub to guard, and still gives us sort of a good amount of travel up around 45, 50, 55 mil, something around that for droop travels. So, all right, so for those guys that are wanting to get more droop out, to get up around that 660, 665, 670 full droop hub to guard, there's just this tiny little section in here, so it's just right on the little corner there. Again, do this at your own risk and your own responsibility, but so that tiny little section there, which just with the flap disc can be sort of touched up a little bit just to give us a little bit more clearance. So as I mentioned earlier, so what we want to do is make sure we get the inner upper control arm bushes tightened up in the mid-range of the travel. So a couple of ways you can do that. You can either cycle the suspension without the spring and shock in there, get your measurements up off the arm to the guard here and go full droop to full bump and go halfway in between. Crank up your inner bolts so we don't tear the rubber and we got even travel each way. The other way you can do it is jack it up roughly to the center of hub to guard, which is halfway between bottom out and top out. So it's roughly, that position's roughly around about, it's 430 bottom out and sort of 650 top out. So it's roughly around 540. You can see this one here. Just jack that up, flex it as much as we can. We've got about 560. So all I can do now is just loosen that nut off the UCA right down. Pop that arm up some more like that, and that'll get us pretty well bang on in the middle of travel. We can tighten up those inner bolts now. Right, so we've got the upper arms in there, picked up that extra droop travel. We're probably gonna see how it goes in the alignment, and then we might even extend those shocks a little bit as well to give them a little more down travel for this particular setup. But all in all, pretty straightforward install, basic tools, you don't need anything too fancy. Just gotta make sure you get them arms set up right, get those upper inner bolts for the UCA there tightened up in the middle of travel, get him set up, and pretty straightforward. Thanks guys.